543. That's suspicious. So, want to welcome these wonderful sponsors that help make this possible. And we have a new one. Give them a round of applause. Squid just came on. Thank you. Got a few people repping Squid here today. So shout out to them. Next week, we've got Zach coming to talk to us about, the title of the talk is, Hey Lodash, You're Doing It Wrong. So, I don't know, that's kind of a sexy title, so maybe it'll be a good talk. Come check that out. What else? I guess that's about it. I want you guys to give Andrew Steele a nice, warm round of applause for his talk. Come on up, Andrew. There we go, right into it.
Howdy, good morning. Today I'm going to give you a talk on hacking games together with React. The alternate title for this is How to Do Things by Not Doing Nothing. One of the key problems that I run into a lot in my own life is I've got all this talent, I've got all this skill. I've been a developer for a little over 12 years now, and I very rarely actually do anything with my skill outside of my job. So the game I'm going to show you is called Don't Go to Jail. You can find it at github.com/Andrew565/go-to-jail with a bunch of hyphens. Or if you are like me and you like a simple way, catlovespizza.ws/dice. Also emojilink.me/dice if you don't remember Cat Loves Pizza. But who can't remember Cat Loves Pizza now that you've seen it? It's a great website, I recommend it. Who am I? That is the International Phonetic Alphabet spelling of my name. I encourage everyone to look up the IPA. It's awesome, and it helps you learn all sorts of things on Wikipedia. Here's the obligatory slide of all of the different programming languages that I've worked with. I started out as a full stack PHP dev. I moved to a Ruby on Rails full stack. And since then, I've been mostly working in the front end for about 6 years now. And I am currently a front-end architect for a little company in Scottsdale, Arizona called InfoArmor, where we do identity theft protection services. A little bit more about me. I am married, just celebrated our 10-year anniversary a couple months ago. Thank you. I've got 3 wonderful kids, plus a 4th on the way due in January, so we've been busy. And we're going to continue to be busy for the foreseeable future. So where did the inspiration for this game that I developed come from? And it came from a very real game called Don't Go to Jail. It's better known as the Monopoly Dice game. Today you can find it at Target or Walmart under the name Monopoly Express. And it's a dice-based game. If any of you have ever played the game Farkle, it's very similar to that. You roll the dice as many times as you can until you get 3 dice to say go to jail. If you hit the go to jail, then you're done. You don't get any points for that round. So you have to do a little bit of how many points can I get on this board before I go to jail. And so this is a game that we play a lot in my family, and we played it so many times that I thought, you know, this is a game that's just got simple enough rules. I bet I could figure out how to make it. So I decided I would actually make it. One of the things that I had to do when I started out making the game was decide how I wanted to make the game. The first thing I did was pick the perfect programming paradigm for my purpose. Oh, sorry, that's supposed to be purpose, not porpoise. That's a little joke on my part. I should say, for the sake of those who are sensitive to such things, that parts of this presentation were produced in partnership with the American Alliteration Association, advising alliterative allies about assuaging oral areas since 1777. That is a real logo from a Lucha Libre Wrestling Federation, by the way. I thought that was hilarious. So one of the things I had to do was look at, do I want to go object-oriented or do I want to do functional programming? Because I'm doing this in React, there's a lot of people who are pushing towards functional programming in React using Redux. It's a very common paradigm today, but it's not one that I'm used to. I grew up in object-oriented programming, and object-oriented programming in JavaScript has always been terrible, but we finally have gotten there a little bit more with ES6 bringing us classes and arrow functions, ES7 and ES8 bringing us async and await, and a bunch of those other things. So I did a little pros and cons, and with object-oriented programming, you are more error prone due to the prevalence of mutability. You can change things within those objects if you're not structuring them right, and so it leads to more errors. Functional programming emphasizes pure functions, functions that return exactly what you expect them to return every single time without changing anything. There's an emphasis there on immutability. Object-oriented can lead to overcomplicated objects. Functional, on the other hand, can lead to a lot of mental overhead with having to create an action that does a dispatch, that then does a store, and there's just a lot of overhead, in my opinion, that got in the way of being able to actually do the programming. Like I said, object-oriented was more familiar for me and functional was more unknown. And so I decided I was going to stick with object-oriented programming on this particular project because I could get going quicker, whereas with functional is going to take longer. Now, one of the things I wanted to emphasize about this, and the reason I walked you through my thinking on this, is when you're taking on a side project, you have to ask yourself, am I doing this to learn something, or am I doing this to do something? Now, if you're learning something, by all means, go the hard route. Take your time. Do something that is outside of your comfort zone. But if you're just trying to get something done, like I've been trying to do for many, many years, I've always wanted to make a game and I never could. I just had to go with what was going to be faster. So that's what I did. And the whole way along the way, I did what I do call TDD WAT, test-driven development without actual tests. Now, we're probably pretty familiar with the mantra red-green refactor. So what I do is I literally pull up my browser, I hit the refresh button, that's red, and it tells me what I need to work on next. So I go and I make that thing, now it's green. I refactor it if I have the time, but for this project, I did not do a lot of refactoring because I had given myself a deadline of having it done in time for this talk, which meant I needed to get it done. And it was hard to get it done in time. In fact, the primary functionality I just finished on Monday, and you still can't actually win the game. It doesn't check to see if you hit the score. You just can play forever and ever, which is okay. So this goes back to one of my mantras, make fun of life or it'll make fun of you. Now, for a long time, I took this as a personal statement to say, I'm just going to do things that I enjoy. I'm going to do things that give me laughs. I'm going to try and find the fun in whatever I'm doing. But there is still something missing. And eventually I found this old Hebrew proverb that really put it into light. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And like I said, I had that longing inside me. I had that burning inside my heart that said, I want to do stuff. I want to make stuff. I want to leave a mark and not just have all of these ideas floating around in my head all day that I didn't actually do anything with. So I took this and I combined it with my mantra to say, if I'm going to make fun of life, that means that I've got to do the things that I'm longing to do. And if I'm going to do that, I got to move fast. I got to do it and not think about making it perfect the first time. Not think about what's the refactored version going to look like now. Instead, I just did it one step at a time. I looked at the next thing, and I looked at the next thing, and I kept going until it was done. So here is the fruits of my labor, the what that I made. I started with the die. And for those like me who didn't know, die is the singular, and dice is the plural. I did not know this. I've been calling singular die dice for years. I had to put that up there. We actually looked in a dictionary to figure this out. My brother and I were completely confused. So I made two different dice arrays, and I set these up as arrays of one value per side and one array per die. And then I have a little die class that I'll show you in just a moment. And so on each of these die, I've got the values for the points, and then there's also wilds, there's railroads, symbolized by the RR, there's light bulbs and water for utilities. If you've played Monopoly, you should know what these things represent. And then I've got the word die at the bottom. Some of you guys over here, I apologize, I'm standing in your way. But there's word arrays at the bottom that say null, go, go, null, null, null. So on each of these word dice, there's 4 blank sides and 2 sides with a word on it. And there's one for go, one for to, and one for jail. And one of the reasons I started off with a null at the beginning is because that way I could initialize my dice and know that I wasn't going to send someone straight to jail on the very first roll. It was always going to be null the very first roll when we started the game. And so let's take a look at the die class. So inside the constructor for the die, I pass in that array of faces, and then I pass in a flag of is this a word die or not. By default, there's more non-word die than there are actual word die, so by default, word die equals false. I set this top faces to the faces that I passed in from that array, and then I have this set current face function, and I've got a trigger update function. Now, one of the reasons that I have this is because I'm not using Redux. I still need a way to let the rest of the app know that something has changed, that there is a state that needs to be refreshed. So as you can tell from that little bit, I'm giving away some of the secret sauce here, the dice are kept in their own store outside of the React app, and the React app imports it into the app. And this allows me to keep all of the functionality related to die inside of the die, keep all of the functionality related to the dice as a whole inside of the dice store. So it keeps things very, very loosely coupled. It keeps things from getting so tightly coupled that I break stuff when I change functionality around. So we use the standard HTML5 event system, and we create a new event at the bottom here called dice updated, and then we set document.dispatch event dice event. And inside my React app, I'll show you in just a minute, I have a listener waiting for that to happen. So here's the dice store. I'm not showing you the whole code. You're going to have to go on my repo to see all of the code. I'm showing you the highlight reel, as it were. Inside the dice store, the first thing I do is I import those collections of dice that I created over in the die class file. And then I set those as the prop dice, property dice, and the word dice inside of the dice store. And I have that trigger update function again. Now, one of the things you may have noticed is the trigger update function is identical here and here. And the reason I do that is so that I can use the same event, dice updated, to trigger throughout the application, because anytime a singular die changes, chances are good I want to refresh a whole bunch of different things. So here's inside the components. I told you I've got that listener, and it's just, again, a simple document.add event listener, dice updated, and it calls this .force update. Now, anyone who's used React for a while now will probably tell you, don't ever use force update. And there's reason for that. It's a horrible method and is really bug prone. And several times I created infinite loops, which actually came very close to melting my laptop. So be really careful if you use force update. Know what you're doing. Be fully aware that everything is nicely neat and put in there the proper way. But that's the way that I do it because it was faster than figuring out how to incorporate this standalone store of die directly into the state of the React app. And so that was the choice that I made, and that was the trade-off that came with it, was if it's not going to live directly in state and I want to keep that functionality separate, I've got to have some way of still saying, hey, there's an update that needs to happen. So this is the view. You saw on the board it was very vertically oriented, and that makes sense if you're a printer and you have this board and it's nice and neat and vertical. But on a screen, you notice most screens are more horizontally oriented, at least on desktops. And for this first version, I made it as a desktop view. So we still have the property areas for each type of property, and then we've got a little player stats area over here with an avatar placeholder because I didn't want to bother actually making avatars. That would take too much time. And so there's the dice themselves. And then we've got just a couple of simple little buttons. Now the way that I set this up is designed for pass and play. So it's going to start off as a desktop app. It's going to eventually become a mobile app that'll work on tablets or on cell phones. And hopefully, eventually, I'll be able to wrap it inside of a wrapper here, there, or the other place and put it out on an app store, both for desktops and for mobile. I may have to go in and change some of the property type of things to make it less obviously a ripoff of an existing game. But we'll get there when we get there. But so I created this as a pass and play from the beginning, knowing I didn't want to have to support a full ecosystem on the back end. So this app right now currently runs 100% client side. You download the app from wherever it's being hosted. You don't have to touch the back end again. There's no persistence. It's not being saved to a database anywhere. So if you walk away and your son or daughter flips the wrong switch, and you got to start your game all over again. But this is the price of moving fast. And I'm pretty happy with how it's come out so far. And I'll show you a demonstration of it later. So this is the components in the back end that I use to make those things. So I've got in my app main, and by the way, I use create React app to scaffold all of the back end parts of this pretty quickly. And inside of my main board area, I've got render property area, and I send in what kind of property I want to make and how many of them I want to make. One of the things you'll notice from the board is some of them have only 2 properties per color. Some of them have, one of them, the railroads, has 4 properties. There's 4 railroads. Everything else is 3. So I designed the property area component to, by default, create 3 properties and then take a secondary argument for if I wanted to do 2 or 4 instead. And then there's another section of property areas under here that I hid. And then down here in an aside, I put in current player stats and the dice list component. And when I started off with this, I was a little bit more noobish on some of the React idioms. So instead of checking this.state.whatever to make sure that I wanted to render something, I just literally put in CSS classes for if I wanted to show the board or show the setup. And it's just a CSS class that's show or hide. And it's really quick and dirty, but it got me where I needed to get fast. Could I refactor that? Absolutely. Will I refactor that? Maybe. So that's the render property function at the top here. It creates a property area. And inside the property area render function, I've got div class name equals property area, a properties.map that walks through this array right here, which takes the props.quantity and creates however many properties I need. And then I have, and by default, quantity equals 3. I'm using some intelligent defaults up there, thanks to ES6's functional defaults. And then I've got a render property type label. That one's not very interesting. The render property function does just a simple div. It's really that easy at that point. And it has a little bit of state here to check and see if there's a dice inside of the property area. It gets from the dice store the number of dice, and then it checks to see, based on my property area type, the color that I'm currently working in, do I have any dice that actually fit in this property area? And then it'll show the dice if there is any. And that's using the little die component down here at the bottom. So one of the things that I did early on was I decided I'm going to style a bunch of things based on the face value. It makes sense that you would have the die have the same color property as the property area itself. So I created some very basic CSS classes, similar to BEM style for CSS, but not 100% prescriptive. They would have gone with something more verbose, I think. But so we have color _ 50, color _ utils, light bulb, water, 100. And this allows me to share some basic colors. And the way that that works on here is inside of the render property, I've got color underscore underscore this dot props dot property type. So that's how it checks to see what color I'm supposed to put in each property or what color the dice are supposed to be. So one of the things that's important about a game is that you know how much points you're getting. So I created a get score function inside of my dice store. Now I put it inside of the dice store because naturally, as an object that holds all of the dice, it made sense to me to put the score function there because the score is completely dependent on what dice you have. So the first thing I do is a helper to sift out which property types only need 2 dice to be a complete set, because you get a bonus if you have a complete set. And there's only 3 different types of properties that only need 3. Then I have a 0-based total score. I have a false flag for has a complete set. The number of available wilds at the beginning is 0. And then I have this little reduce function that I shrunk here that goes through and just tallies up how many of each type of dice I have. And one of the things it does is every time it runs into a wild, it'll add 1 to this available wilds number. And then, now that we know how many of each kind of die there are, we check to see if there's enough to make any complete sets. So I have another constant that I defined somewhere else called property types and value order. And this allows me to go through each of the different types and check, do I have a complete set of this type or not? And if I do, using this function below it, have a complete set of, we check to see if the type is railroad, I need 4 of them. If it's inside of the need to array, then I only need 2 of them. Otherwise, I need 3. And that it's a nested ternary statement. And I like nested ternary statements. I don't care who you are. I like them. Get a reference to how many natural dice of this type we have, and I assign that to has. If the number we has is more than or equal to the number we need, should never be more than, then return true. And that's what we do right here. Otherwise, we check to see if we have any available wilds. And if we have any available wilds, then because we're going in value from the most valuable to the least valuable, we start assigning wilds to the most valuable sets first. So if I have one 500 plus a wild, I get the bonus for having the highest set. And that's why we have that in value order there. And then if we don't have enough, we just return false. And we have that inside of a for each. And at the end of the for each, we then go on to if not a complete set. And one of the things about the dice game here is if you don't have a complete set and you end your turn, you still get some points if you have anything held that is worth anything. So if this goes through, again, the property types and value order and checks to see from the most valuable to the least valuable, do I have at least one of these things? And if I do, then I get the points for those. So one of the other parts of the game, like I said earlier, is you don't want to roll go to jail. So I have a very, very simple function that checks if you have go to jail displaying. Now I could have written this in the way to check to see does this word dice have the word go, the word to, or the word jail? But obviously that's really kind of silly and redundant to check does it have a value over and over again. So what I did was I created a reduce function that checks to make sure it's not null. That's why there's a bunch of nulls in there. Most people who do object-oriented programming will tell you never have an object that returns null unless you want to check for null everywhere. And I decided I'm just going to check for null. So it works. And so this checks the number of words. If it's not null, return true and add 1 to the number of matches. And at the end, return, do I have 3? And if I have 3, then I know that I've got go to jail, and you lose. So one of the things I try to advocate now that I wish I was doing better at when I started this game was being as stateless as often as possible. So here's an example of one of the few components that actually came out stateless completely. And you can see we import React and we import the CSS directly into the component. I do that for all of the components. They have their own CSS file with just enough styles to define that component. So we try to keep things single responsibility, both in the component side and in the style side. This is the current player stats, and it doesn't do anything fancy. It takes in turn and player, and we've got destructuring assignment there for the defaults. And we check first if there's no player or there's no turn, return null. This is for when you're first starting up the game and there's no actual game yet. It just doesn't do anything. It just returns null. I could also have that refactored to just return nothing. Otherwise, if we have a player in a turn, we do this where we return the placeholder avatar, the player's ID, what turn it currently is, and their current score. Really, really simple stuff. But I wanted to show you it is possible to have elegant components without a bunch of state tied to them. Not every component has to be a React class. So all of this comes from a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. This was Facebook's founding principles in many ways: move fast and break things. They've since gone beyond that to move fast with stable architecture, which is much less sexy. But for this is my mantra. And I needed to know from the get-go, this wasn't going to be pretty. This wasn't going to be elegant. The code was not going to be clean, but it was going to get done. And that was what was important to me, again, was that it just gets done. And so this comes from, again, that quote: hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is the tree of life. And I want to spend just a little bit of time here with you guys, because it's really the crux of why I came up here to do this talk today, was to try and inspire you that you have a lot of skills, you have a lot of ability, and you should be doing more with it. And a lot of my reasoning came from this right here. You may not be able to read it back there in the back, but it says, The Misguided Adventures of Max Powerfile II by Andrew Steele. That's me. This is my first novel. I finally finished my first novel. It took me 18 years, but I finally finished the first draft of a novel with a whole lot of red ink in it right now, thanks to my wife. But it inspired me to say, I can finish things, and you can too. You may think, oh, I finish stuff at work all the time, but that's finishing something for someone else. When's the last time you finished something for you? When's the last time you did what your heart was longing for? Robin Williams, God rest his soul, he gave us this little quote too. You're only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it. And that's what I'm trying to do for you guys here today, is show you all of us have just a little something deep down inside of us that's yearning and burning to get out of us. And I really want you to know it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't even have to work half the time, because mine doesn't. It just has to get done, and it has to come out of you because it has to live. So when should you start? I'm pretty sure you can guess. The answer is now, today, if not sooner. Get out your notebook if you have one. Start writing down ideas at this very moment. It's worth it because you are brilliant. You have ideas that are worth doing, worth pursuing, worth getting out there and sharing with people. And just like I'm sharing this game with you today. So I have my mantra, make fun of life, because, or else it'll make fun of you. This is the mantra I want you all to adopt, with apologies to Aperture Labs. I will because I can. I will do what I can because I must. I want you all to take that and internalize it. I will because I can. I will do what I can because I must. Now, who wants to see the game? Yeah. Don't go to jail. This is the game, and it is really just that bare bones right now. You can choose how many players you want. There's no limit. Because it's pass and play, your only limit is how much you're willing to pass your laptop around. You can change what score you want to play to, but like I said earlier, it doesn't check it yet. So you're kind of just stuck checking yourself. And so here's the interface. Like I showed you, you hit the roll dice. The dice just pop up over on the side there. And if you roll go to jail, you get a little modal that says, oh no, you rolled go to jail. Move on to the next player. I'm playing by myself right now, which is usual. Sorry. A little sidetrack there. And you can click on the dice to keep them. If you don't click any and you hit end turn, it'll still check to see through the same get score function to see if you have anything worth keeping. And I'm actually going to end the turn right there since I've got go and jail. I earned 3,000 points this round. Yay! You're probably wondering, wait a second, 250, the bonus is only supposed to be 2,200. Well, it's because we got a wild. So that wild added up with the first thing it found that wasn't a 250, which I think was probably this right here, the utility, to give me the extra 800 bonus points. So that's the game, and you can play it, like I said, forever and ever. Right now, the only place you can get it is by cloning it from my GitHub, which, remember, the link was catlovespizza.ws for website /dice. And if you can't remember that, God have mercy on your soul. No. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Anybody have any questions? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So I'm feeling way behind the times with all these non-ASCII characters. Is that actually part of JavaScript now with things like the greater than or equal signs using?
That is a very fancy font, and what he's referring to is inside of some of these guys here. I've got a different font. Oh, I think I actually took those screenshots on my work laptop.
Okay, so it's just the way your text editor is displaying the code?
Sorry, but yeah, that's from a programming font called, oh, which one did I go with? I don't remember, but you can find it. It's called Monoid, and Monoid is a programming font that makes use of ligatures. That one. And Fira Code is another one. And they have these fun little ligatures that combine your normal symbols. So like does not equal is actually the three different characters for the exclamation point and two equal signs. And ligatures just smashes it together into a fancy little symbol. And Fira Code is the one that I use, and I really like Fira Code. It's based on Fira Sans from Firefox.
All right, thanks.
Others?
All right.
All right. Everybody give Andrew a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.